Atheist Nomads, episode 370. The Secular Coalition for America with Casey Brinck.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and in a little bit I'll be joined by Casey Brinck. But got a little bit of house cleaning and a couple of news stories that I want to talk about before we get to that. So, yeah, this is episode 370, and I had the goal a while ago of doing a live stream about every 5 or 10 episodes, and we haven't done one since 350, I think, so we kind of fell behind on that. The live streaming setup is still really close to being done, and I will be finishing getting that, the improved, even more improved version of that set up before too long. Hopefully in 2 weeks we'll shoot for. But yeah, we're got the camper done. It's everything's fine with that, and trying to get as much use out of that, and also finishing up some additional repairs that were still needed. That, yeah, so haven't gotten to it. We will soon, I promise. I will hopefully have more details next week. And in the news, there's a couple stories that were just way too big to not talk about. First, we're going to talk about Kenosha, Wisconsin. This is a story that I know everybody's heard. But yeah, I still want to talk about it too anyway. It all started with Jacob Blake, who was black, going to help break up a domestic fight. A neighbor of the couple who was fighting saw this and called the police. Not about Blake trying to break up the fight, but about the domestic disturbance. So he was there trying to help, and the police were called. The police talked to him, and as he was walking back to his car, they had their guns drawn and aimed at him. He had told them what his involvement was, and he did tell them that he had a knife in his car. This is something that, when opening arguments talked about this, that Andrew pointed out that in the advice that he would give anybody to cut down on their chances of being killed by the police, if you have a weapon, disclose it. That will make it so the police won't be surprised and will decrease the chances of something bad happening to you. So he was doing everything as right as possible. And then when he started to open up the door to his car, a police officer grabbed him, and while starting to throw him to the ground, shot him in the back 7 times. He is now paralyzed, probably for the rest of his life from the waist down. It's amazing, after being shot at point-blank range 7 times, that he survived. The most reasonable description of what happened there is the police attempted to execute somebody for trying to break up a fight, and failed. So obviously, that sparked a whole new round of protests. And with the continued lack of government action, obviously the anger was high enough that there was some vandalism. Also, nearly everyone arrested by the police for being involved in any acts of violence or any vandalism was from out of state, or at least out of town. So it's not even the angry local people that are acting violently like most of these cases. It's outside agitators trying to make things worse. Well, a militia group put out a call for people to come protect businesses from the vandals. One person who responded to that call was Kyle Rittenhouse. a 17-year-old from across the border in Illinois who took his AR-15 across state lines, joined a defensive perimeter around a car dealership, talked to the police. They thanked him for being there and helping protect this business. They gave him water. He was a 17-year-old in possession of an assault rifle, something that is illegal in both the states of Wisconsin and Illinois. In Wisconsin, you need to be 18 to have a weapon in your possession. In Illinois, you need to be 21. And in both states, you need to be at least 21 to do open carry. So he was in illegal possession of a firearm and crossed state lines with that, which makes it a federal offense as well. Then, as he was leaving the car dealership, he was walking past the protesters. He heard a shot fired, and he turned and fired in the direction that the sound of a gunshot came from. Like, literally, he just turned around and opened fire. He shot someone. People tried to get the gun away from him, so he shot more people. In the end, 2 people were dead. And by the time the police responded, he ran past them with his hands up and tried to turn himself in, and they told him, no, get out of here. The police were responding to a shooting and told the shooter to leave the scene. This is the same police department that had just shot a man for trying to help break up a domestic disturbance. You want to know why there's protests? That is why there's protests. There are serious, serious issues here that go deep. And among them is the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse has gotten kudos from the President of the United States and has multiple fundraising attempts to cover his legal defense, including one that was done on a Christian fundraising site called Give, Send, Go, which exists to raise money to send missionaries overseas. And they've raised at least $270,000. This is disgusting. Everything about this is disgusting. And in Portland, over last weekend, a group of right-wing, pro-gun, militia or militia-like organizations organized a parade of vehicles, mostly pickups, with a lot of Trump flags, to go from the suburbs around Portland into downtown where the protesters are. The police asked them to stay out of downtown, and they went into downtown anyway. One of the groups was Patriot Prayer. As they continued into downtown, they started releasing bear spray and shooting paintballs into the crowd. Now, if you've already got protests that have been going on for more than 2 months, and you go in and you start hitting people with paintballs and spray bear mace at them, that is looking for a fight. And they got one. One of the Patriot Prayer members, Aaron Danielson, was shot and died in the middle of that. They're trying to claim and are getting Trump to claim that these are radical anarchists No, these are people protesting for an end to systemic issues. And militia groups coming and firing into a crowd, even with paintballs, is a ridiculous amount of agitation. And as often as the interactions between those protests and federal forces or local police or counter demonstrations has turned violent, it would make sense that there'd be some people on either side of the protest who would have guns. And if you start shooting into the crowd, it's not surprising that somebody shoots back. Like, it's not surprising that a kid with an assault rifle would hear a gunshot and would shoot back, like happened in Kenosha. That shouldn't happen. There shouldn't be violence at these protests. But when one side is trying to have a peaceful protest and the other side is escalating the tensions with things like shooting paintballs or showing up with assault rifles, both of those are escalating tensions. That is definitely raising the tensions to the level of a violent confrontation. This was a group going into a protest looking for a fight. Heck, both of those were cases where people were going into, right-wing radicals were going into protests looking for a fight. We've been talking for years here on the podcast that civilians do not need to have weapons of war unless you want to live in a war-torn country. And when children are gaining access to weapons of war and responding to a call from a far right-wing militia group to defend a business, that's a huge part of this. Is all just really messed up. The centuries of systemic racism are a major issue that need to be resolved. The growing right-wing militia movement is something that is terrifying and needs to be resolved. You know, right-wing militias right now are not the public health crisis and human rights crisis that systemic racism is. But if left unchecked, they will be. In part because they will be that will become a growing part, will continue to be a growing part of the public health issues with systemic racism. And this violent, fascist, theocratic right-wing movement that is getting put on the stage at the Republican National Convention, who didn't even bother having a platform. Yeah, they just support Donald Trump. And they're getting support from the president directly. The decision that the United States is going to be making on November 3rd is going to be, it is a decision between, do we want radical militias shooting people in the streets, or do we want to try to begin healing the wounds of our country? We are now joined by Casey Brinck, the Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the Secular Coalition of America. Casey, welcome to Atheist Nomads.
Thank you so much, Dustin. I appreciate you and Lauren inviting me on, and it's great to be here.
So let's start off first with the organization you work for. What is the Secular Coalition for America, and what does it do?
Sure. Our mission is simple. We advocate for the religious freedom that's guaranteed in the First Amendment of the Constitution. our work is to bring respect and visibility to non-theists. We have 19 organizations that are part of our coalition. That includes hundreds of local secular communities, and working with our allies in the faith community. We try to combine the power of grassroots activism with professional lobbying to make an impact on the laws and policies that govern the separation between religion and government.
You said 19 member organizations?
That's correct.
That's a lot.
You can go to our website. You can go to our website at secular.org, and we have a list of all of them. And of course, it links to their websites as well, and you can learn all about what they do. Some of their missions differ slightly from ours, but we all do fall under the secular umbrella, and we're so happy to have such a strong team with us working on this mission.
Right, because that includes like American Atheists and American Humanists, but also smaller organizations too.
Absolutely. Freedom from Religion Foundation, Black Nonbelievers, Atheist Alliance of America, the Center for Inquiry. The list goes on and on. Camp Quest.
Yeah.
I could sit here for 10 minutes and name all of our member organizations. But again, I welcome your listeners to go to secular.org, and you can learn about everything that they do there and everything that we do as well. And also, if they're so inclined, there is that donate button at the top right of the homepage.
All right, so you can donate directly to the Secular Coalition, but can't join it unless you're an organization.
No. Well, we absolutely have our own membership.
Oh, okay.
You can go to our website there, and you can sign up for our newsletters and for all of our mailings, and find out the latest that's going on in the secular community. As well as what our member organizations, our partners, are doing to make sure that separation between government and religion is maintained and strengthened.
All right. Yeah, and I've been on that mailing list for a long time, and I have to say the articles you've been writing have been really good.
Well, that's appreciated. We try to put that information out there as much as we can, to make sure that the secular community stays well informed and understands what's happening in Washington on their behalf.
So then and the SCA is a 501c3, right? Or is it a C4?
We are both. We do have the right. We do have the education and advocacy arm, but we also do have the direct lobbying arm. So the donations are not tax deductible, unfortunately, but those dollars do go to make a direct impact in Washington by putting your voices or the secular community's voices directly in front of our elected officials who make policy, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that religion stays out of those policies. And
that also means that you aren't bound by the Johnson Amendment because it's not tax deductible, right?
No, well, so we are bound by the Johnson Amendment, but we do advocate on issues that are specific. So
okay.
It's very easy to sort of figure out where we stand on each issue, and it might not always be with the same party, and but that is something that we do adhere to. Yes.
Okay. All right. So then. That helps shape what my next question is, so I don't get you in trouble.
Sure.
Even though nobody's actually enforcing that right now, I still don't want you to get in trouble.
Well, that's a whole nother. So that's part of what we're fighting for. When this administration came in, one of the first things that the president did was make claims that the Johnson Amendment has been all but abolished, and that's one of the top priorities of his administration. So, we understand that it's not necessarily being enforced right now. We hope that will change soon.
Well, and if you are trying to fight to get it enforced, if you're not following it, then your argument's going to be a lot weaker.
Right, exactly. And we do our very best to make sure that we do not violate the Johnson Amendment, but we understand that it is happening out there.
All right. And then I guess, what exactly is it supposed to prevent?
So the Johnson Amendment was designed to prevent nonprofit and religious organizations from campaigning from the pulpit, essentially,
right?
From supporting a political candidate over another in an official capacity. And so that is something that has been completely ran roughshod over the past 3.5, 4 years. And it's something that we would like to see enforced once again.
So then I could talk to you about policy issues and government officials, but not necessarily about campaigns.
We don't officially support any political candidate.
Right.
That's the best way to put that.
Right. Okay.
I was just going to say, we don't officially support or endorse any political candidate, but we do advocate on the issues. And I think that the people can find out very easily for themselves on which candidates support secular values and which don't.
So with the current direction that the government has been taking, including the Supreme Court, how much of the wall of separation is left?
Well, it's deteriorating quickly. And I'm 46 years old. I worked on Capitol Hill for over 10 years, and I worked in a federal agency for another almost a year. And I have never seen the assault on the Establishment Clause as great as it is right now in my entire life. It's shocking, really. And one of the things I'd like to purvey to the other side is, it's all good and well when it's their religion and their people who are sort of eroding that wall, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens when it's not your religion and when it's not your constituency who are eroding that wall, who are holding these higher offices? And that would be my argument to the other side is, it goes both ways, and be careful what you practice, right? Because it can come back to bite you. So, that's one of the things that I personally sort of try to get across to offices that aren't usually receptive to secular ideas. So that's something that we're going to continue to do and try to increase that the population, or at least the knowledge of secularism and what it really is about on Capitol Hill.
Well, the same people who make claims that there's Sharia districts in Dearborn, Michigan are a lot of the same people who are trying to erode the separation of church and state, which would prevent Sharia districts from being set up in Dearborn, Michigan.
Right. That's exactly right. I would always refer to Representative Jamie Raskin, who's a member of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, is one of the most brilliant congressional scholars I've ever come across in my career. And I would, if anybody ever had any questions or wanted to hear somebody speak eloquently on the Constitution, I would listen to, and the First Amendment in particular, and the Establishment Clause, I would listen to speeches that Representative Raskin has put out. You can easily go to his, I'm sorry I don't have a link ready for you, but I know that you can just YouTube Rep Raskin and his speeches will pop up. He's a great resource for your listeners.
Okay. And then, so obviously, church-state separation. What are kind of some of the specifics that you're lobbying on right now?
So, well, the recent Supreme Court rulings that have come down, whether it be Montana versus Espinoza, Little Sisters of the Four versus Pennsylvania, these decisions are extremely concerning to our community and to the secular nature of our government. I'm not sure how much your listeners have been following the Supreme Court. I'm sure a lot. But in Montana versus Espinoza, basically now the floodgates have been opened for federal dollars to be going to private, which are mostly predominantly religious affiliated schools. That erosion itself is shocking. You combine that with what's been going on in the CARES Act, with the Paycheck Protection Program, where for the first time in the history of our nation, we've been paying religious clergy for their service. So the things that we are advocating about right now at SCA have mostly fallen under those lines. We have been talking a lot about our concerns about the vouchers that are being contained in the COVID-19 relief packages, as well as our concerns about the Paycheck Protection Program. There was a bill that was introduced by, you have companion bills, one on the Senate and one on the House side. The Senate side bill was introduced by Senator Warren. It is called the CORE Act, and on the House side, it is also the CORE Act, and that was introduced by Representative Jayapal, who is a member of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus as well. Those bills would provide rigorous oversight over any entities who have received federal funds through the Paycheck Protection Program. So that's something that we are supporting wholeheartedly. We would love to see exactly where that money has been spent that has gone to these religious institutions. A couple other pieces of legislation that we're supporting strongly right now: the Stop FGM, which is Female Genital Mutilation Act, that was introduced by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. We would love to see that passed. Of course, the blasphemy resolution introduced by Representative Raskin, which has strong bipartisan support, and there's a companion resolution to that as well in the Senate, and introduced by a very conservative Senator Langford from Oklahoma. So, that bill should have strong bipartisan support, and we would love to see it passed. I'm sure you and your listeners are very aware of the American who was killed in Pakistan recently. He was tried under blasphemy laws and was shot and killed in court. So these are things that we're strongly advocating for, and of course the Equality Act and the Women's Health Production Act and the Each Woman Act and the Scientific Integrity Act. I mean, these are all bills that we will be working on both in this Congress and in the 117th Congress. I don't want to say hopefully, but possibly there will be a new administration in the Oval Office that will be more receptive to a lot of these pieces of legislation. So we're looking forward to really getting our noses back to the grindstone.
Well, if we want to not use partisan language in it, right. If the election goes well, we will have a more rational a more rational occupant of the White House, and hopefully be able to flip the Senate to being under the control of more rational people.
That is a good way to put it. Rational is what we want.
Because right now, the Republican Party does not seem to be in any way whatsoever rational, which is something Republicans should be as concerned about as anybody else.
Right. I agree with you completely. So speaking to my time on the Hill, I worked for 3 different Republicans. So I was born and raised, not born, but I was raised here in D.C. And so ending up working for Republicans was sort of just by chance for me. That said, I'm also a veteran. So I do have a sort of that patriotic sensibilities in my own political thinking. But, I have always sort of sided on the left-hand side of most issues. So, I can confidently agree with you that the Republican Party has sort of lost its way in the last 4 years. And it's not the party that I knew growing up, and not even the party that I remember working for as recently as 4 years ago. So, it's something that the voters will determine in November, and we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah. If the people formerly referred to as Tea Partiers in the Republican Party were to lose their seats, we might actually have a chance at getting two viable, reasonable parties again.
Yeah. It's been a drastic swing, and I feel like, both parties, to some extent, can come a little bit more towards the center lane. But, my main concern is that separation between state and religion. And we want to do everything that we can to make sure that religion does not have any input in any of the laws that govern our nation.
Yeah. So with working for 3 Republican congressmen, was that why you saw so many religious lobbyists, or were Democrats getting as much?
Absolutely. I'm sure that had something to do with it. The first member I worked for was from Indiana, and I was given that job on a temporary basis. They basically told me, hey, you'll be here 9 months, and in 9 months, somebody else is taking your job. That happened, and at that point, I'd sort of made my bed on the hill as far as who I could work for. So I just sent my resume out, and I was fortunate enough to be hired on by a member from Florida, and I worked for him for quite many years. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for the man. And although I didn't always agree with him politically, it taught me a lot working in that office, and I learned a lot about what influences politics on Capitol Hill, or policy making, more specifically, I should say.
So then, how common is it for people in congressional offices to really just be people who are trying to do a job, not ideologues who are trying to advance a particular agenda?
So, it's funny. I came across both. It's sort of a mix. I think there are a lot of people up there who are just trying to do a job. That's something that they've always aspired to, is work in Washington, and it didn't really matter on who they were working for. But you certainly have the other end of the spectrum as well, where people who have been very dedicated to movements or ideals, and that's what's driven them to Washington. So I saw a mix of both. But I will say this, most Capitol Hill staffers are, they're very educated people. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of lends itself to a little bit less of extreme thinking, whether it be from either party that they work for. So I think that a lot of Capitol Hill staffers, and also just the nature of having to compromise through your work, allows for them to sort of see both sides more than your typical person out in the public would. They're seeing both sides of the issue a lot. So I like to believe in the good in people, right? So I like to believe that when people are formulating policy, and the people that I work for, 99.9% of them were good people who wanted to do honest work and put forth the right message. But it also depends on who you work for a lot, So you're sort of restrained by what your boss wants, just like anybody is in the real world. So it goes both ways. But again, I feel like most Capitol Hill staff are middle of the road when it comes to how they think about the issues and what needs to be done. That's not to say they don't advocate strongly for their side, because they do, but they have that ability to compromise and see both sides in order to get the job done. Okay.
Which just about anybody in any job is going to be not as opinionated at work as they might be at home, generally speaking.
Right. Right. That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so you got to see some of that transition firsthand as
I did.
the the political system entirely imploded on itself.
I did.
That must have been pretty nerve-wracking.
I guess when you're in the mix, it doesn't affect you as much just because you're so busy dealing with everything. But I can certainly understand the concern that everyone has regarding our political system and the lack of compromise that we see, or the lack of progress that we've been seeing. But it's something that I have faith in the American people that through our elections and through our system and through our shared sort of common goals that we will continue to make the progress that we need to move this country forward.
All right. So you are still optimistic.
I am. I think you have to be in this job. If you're completely cynical, then what's the point? If you feel like you can't make a difference, then why are you here trying to make a difference? So, yeah, I am optimistic. I believe the demographics show that the country is moving towards a secular sort of state, and that's encouraging to me. Even the number of Republican atheists are on the rise. That's encouraging to me. It's something that I can see, as the secular community, oftentimes, our values rise above the parties that we identify with. So I believe that there is a big swell in this nation towards a more, right now we have a lot of discourse happening and a lot of unrest, and rightfully so. But I believe that causes greater discourse and greater understanding. So, I am encouraged. I think right now it's always darkest before the dawn, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of how I'm feeling right now.
All right. Yeah, and you can, when you look around at history, you see plenty of examples of political polarization and egotistical ideologues, or not even ideologues, egotistical would-be tyrants being able to promote gridlock in the legislature and seize complete control. And that's happened in almost every other country that's had a system, that's been based on the American system of government. But there's also examples where things get bad and ugly, and that promotes reform and major change and major improvement. Right.
And that sort of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier, when speaking to the other, to the other side or whatever, is that, we need to remember that, you can't support one tyrant and then say the next person is a tyrant. So that needs to be understood, I think, and it needs to be understood by all sides, that we need to stick by our constitutional values and adhere to them strictly, no matter the party in power. And that's something that I believe has been sort of lost over the last 4 years. So it's something I look forward to see being restored, and I think it would better us all.
Well, even just over the last 20 years, consistently, we've been seeing more and more executive power.
This is true. Every president seems to increase the amount of executive orders they issue and things of that nature. That's another thing that SEO will be working on in the 117th Congress, is seeing what can be done about executive orders. You're right. That erosion seems to have been going on quite a while now, and it's really starting to show itself. And I think people are starting to react to it. And I think that's what you've seen in the past couple of elections. It's sort of swung back and forth, right? The American people are trying to find out exactly where it's all going to land. And I think that this election coming up in November is sort of, those were playoffs, and I look at like this is the big game, right? So,
Yeah.
Again, I'm very encouraged and hopeful, and I look forward to continuing the work that we've been doing and hopefully getting even better results.
All right. So then, okay, let's say hypothetical. Joe Biden wins the presidency and Democrats get 60 seats in the Senate and maintain control of the House. What kind of bills would the SCA be pushing at that point?
Well, so our wish list, huh? So our wish list. Let's see. We would love to see a repeal of RFRA. We would love to pass the Nonprofit Transparency Act and require churches to file 990. We want to see some judicial reform and increase the number of federal judges who have sort of a secular viewpoint. As far as appropriation,
so that would be both just increasing the number of judges as well as doing the packing the courts.
We would like to see an overhaul of the judicial system in general, but yes, those would be the goals. We would like to see more judges that are friendlier to constitutional values. So
not Heritage Foundation picks.
Right. That's correct. Not the Heritage Foundation pick.
Okay.
Right. But that's just to name a few. And again, some of the other bills, do no harm, scientific integrity, the No Ban Act, Stop FGM, the list goes on and on. But SCA and our partner organizations will continue to be at the forefront of that work and putting our voices and faces in front of Capitol Hill legislators and staff and making sure that they know what the secular community is concerned about and what we are looking to have accomplished.
All right. And then how closely do you guys work with the Congressional Free Thought Conference or caucus?
Extremely close. They are our strongest allies and advocates on Capitol Hill. We could not be more grateful or happier about the work that they do on the behalf of the secular community. The Congressional Free Thought Caucus has the only openly non-theist member of either the House or Senate as its chair. That would be Representative Jared Huffman from California. And also Representative Raskin serves as the co-chair. He is Jamie Raskin. He's from Maryland. Again, he's the representative I mentioned earlier, who's such an incredible constitutional scholar. I highly recommend anybody to listen to what he has to say about the subject. As a former Republican staffer, I just listened to this guy, and I want him to run for president one day. So,
Nice.
I really do. He's incredible, and I'm actually very lucky to live right across the street from his district. Literally, if I lived across the street, I would be in his district. But, right?
Oh, wow.
So, but I am in D.C., so that's a good spot too. Eleanor Norton Holmes is a wonderful representative. But I'm sorry, I forgot what we were talking about, Dustin.
How closely you work with the Congressional Free Thought?
Right. So yes, absolutely, very closely. They are our champions on Congress. In Congress. So whenever we are looking to sort of push an initiative or just even feel out an idea, those are the initial offices that we will reach out to and get movement on and see what can be done on a particular issue. But again, we're extremely grateful for their action and their support and everything that they do. They're extremely gracious and couldn't be happier with what they do.
All right, now I'm going to ask you the opposite scenario.
Sure.
What if Donald Trump wins re-election, the Republicans keep control of the Senate, and they take back the House, what would the SCA's focus then be?
Well, my job security would be really good. So there's that. That's about. That's what I keep. I'm trying to find silver linings here, Dustin. You know.
Yeah.
Trying to find silver linings, man. But so, what would be the concern there? Well, what wouldn't be the concern? It's Donald. It's this administration in their second term with no sort of checks and balances as far as the second election goes. So SCA will continue to advocate as strongly as we possibly can on the issues that affect the secular community, and we will continue to push for the bills that we would like to see passed and signed into law, and we will do anything that we can to make sure that that is done. It'll be a busy time for us, and we'll have a lot to address. Just recently, Secretary of State Pompeo and his Commission on Unalienable Rights came out with their report, which is heavily framed around a sort of Protestant Christianity view of human rights through history. And so, there are concerns about that being used to formulate foreign policy. The list goes on and on. So SCA will be very busy if that's the case. As far as the reception we would get to our voices would be certainly questionable, but we're looking for something beyond that in November. So but again, if that is the case, we will be as loud and as strong an advocate as the secular community as we ever have been. And we will continue to do that work on Capitol Hill in Washington to make sure that the community is not only represented but listened to and acknowledged. So that's our mission.
So if the election goes one way, you'll be working on making progress. If the election goes the other way, you'll be trying to fight going the wrong way.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's the best way to put it. It's either, are we going to be moving forward, or are we going to be, that being a bulwark against regression? So that's what's at stake in November. And I hope that all of your listeners go out in November and vote or mail in their vote. We would like to see record numbers at the polls this year. And I think that if that happens, we'll be looking at the first scenario that you spoke of.
All right. And then what have you been seeing on access to the polls? I'm sure that's something you're watching as well. This is a tricky time.
It is, for the administration to be limiting the Postal Service during a time of national pandemic or worldwide pandemic and a presidential election coming up, it just is staggering. So, we are going to do anything that we can to advocate for people getting out the vote. And one of the ways that you can do that is by going to one of our member organizations has organized the Secular Votes Initiative this year. They're the Secular Students Alliance. I highly recommend your listeners go to their website and get involved that way. If you can register to vote there, and they'll show you your voting stations and all that good stuff. So I highly recommend a visit to their website. They do a lot of good work. They have over, I believe, 300 chapters at universities and college campuses across the country. And the work that they've been doing this year to get the vote out is incredible. And we're very proud of that effort.
All right. And then, of course, I'm sure from what I've seen, it's request your ballot now and fill it out as soon as you get it. If you get it,
that's right.
If you're voting by mail.
Yep. Request it yesterday and fill it out yesterday and send it in. That's right. We want to make sure that all of those votes are counted and there's no reason for dispute or challenging or anything of that nature in November. We want to see a clean, smooth election and a landslide for secular values is what we would love to see.
All right. And then turning things around, your background, you've written about it on a number of occasions in the SCA newsletter.
Yeah.
So you said you've been an atheist almost your entire life. Did you grow up in a religious household?
So I did. Well, I wouldn't say it was religious. Both of my parents were raised Catholic. My mother, at one point, before meeting my father, wanted to be a nun, even for a short period. But growing up, she was never vocally religious or outspoken about it to me or my brother. We didn't go to church every Sunday until I guess my father remarried when I was in junior high school, and my stepmother and her kids went to church, so we started going with them. And I was basically forced to go to church for 7 years of my life. Although I will say the last 4.5, it would be usually me and my brothers we would say we were going to the later mass, and we would just go, drive around and get into trouble. Usually, we'd pick up the program for the mass, and then we'd head home and show the program to my stepmother, and she'd be satisfied, and that'd pretty much be it. Okay. So, but personally, I think I sort of started, understanding my lack of a belief in a God or whatever you want to call it, right around the same time as I probably started realizing Santa Claus wasn't real. But I sort of took that and kept it to myself and never really thought about it or talked about it too much. And then later on in life, I would end up joining the Army. And then in the Army, you sort of experience religion in a whole different way. It's sort of pushed on you by the institution itself in some ways, and then you'll have, superiors who are above you who are religious or devout in some sort of fashion, and they sort of try to influence that upon those under them. And I saw that a lot, and so again, I didn't think about it too much because I didn't really let it affect me too much. And I think that's another issue that we as atheists in general might have. Speaking as somebody who's new to the movement, I think it's a little different than somebody who's been involved in it for maybe 20 years or whatever, and very sort of vocal in that, and been a vocal advocate about the issues. But I think that, if you're a religious person, you sort of have this strong religious belief, right? And you want to talk about it, and it's very important to you. If you have no belief, you don't really think about it that much, right? Until it becomes to affect you, until you see these other people's beliefs being forced upon you. So that's something I think that we need to start educating the general public on. Like, hey, are you an atheist? Think about it, and think about what that means, and think about how that affects you, and affects, and how everyone else not being an atheist affects you. I think that would mobilize more people into sort of understanding the importance of secularism and would get them to get involved. And I was guilty of it myself. Again, I didn't think about it much until later on in life, and until I got in the Army, and then of course working on Capitol Hill, when I saw the influence that religion is playing in these, in these federal institutions, whether it be the military or Capitol Hill or in our agencies or whatever. And so, there's a reason why the First Amendment is the First Amendment. And so I'm a big believer in the United States Constitution, and I think that that'll always be the sort of the founding place that we should all go when it comes to governance.
Right. Well, and like you wrote about a story, I believe it was Memorial Day, when you were in the Army in Somalia, where you got to interact with Muslims and devout evangelicals.
Yeah.
Did that kind of shake up the way you viewed the relationship between, religion and just life in general?
Well, it did. I mean, you saw that both sides were convinced that they were absolutely right in their viewpoints, to the point where violence was acceptable, and even justified and even praised, right? So, and I saw it on both sides. I saw it from the soldier from Alabama all the way to the Somali, from Mogadishu, and it sort of solidified my thinking that these people are all wrong, at the very least, if there is a God, at the very least he's absentee. And of course, this is when I was much younger. So why all the bluster, and why all the dedication to violence and hurting somebody else in a person's name? So it solidified my atheist beliefs, and made me understand that religion, in my opinion, has caused more issues than it's helped. And so that sort of was my own personal path to really recognize being a self-recognized atheist and stating it openly and loudly.
And did you see more pushing of religion from commanders or chaplains?
I don't know. Have you ever seen Full Metal Jacket?
Yeah.
And then the scene where the drill sergeant is making them all stand up and sing "Happy Birthday" to Jesus. You certainly come across that type of person in the military. But I honestly, I was in for 3 years. A big chunk of that time I was in the field. I was either sleeping on top of a tank or I was in Africa. So I didn't have a lot of interaction with the chaplain, simply because as an atheist, I never went to any services or partook in any of that. I certainly was present for prayers for the platoon and things of that nature. But again, I just sort of kept my mouth shut and just went about my business. It wasn't until I started working in government that I really understood that, hey, as an atheist, I need to get involved. I need to understand what's going on. I need to pay attention to the erosion that we're seeing between that wall. So, that was the driving forces behind my sort of becoming a self-recognized atheist and then wanting to do something about it in a professional level.
Okay. Getting back to the wall, with that being in as poor of shape as it is right now, what do we need to do to rebuild it?
If we're speaking technical legislation, there are things that can be done. Again, repealing RFRA. I would like to see a judicial system that pays more attention to the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment.
Do we need legislation to make it more explicit?
That would be something that should certainly be looked at and considered. There are a million lawyers on Capitol Hill and in these organizations who would love to, I'm sure, draft up something to strengthen that First Amendment. And, we're going to do everything that we can, whether it from the biggest issues like that to the smallest ones, because they all matter. And they all they all add to that porousness that you were just mentioning. So, we'll continue to do everything that we can, whether it's legislatively, advocacy wise, or just educating the general public on what's going on.
So replace the Religious Freedom Restoration Act with the Church-State Separation Restoration Act.
There you go. There you go. We'd love it. Yeah.
Because I could easily, because that's one of those where it's mostly Supreme Court precedent based off of a phrase in the Constitution, right?
Right. Correct.
So if that's all they have to go off of, then that's all they have to go off of. But if Congress were to clearly define prohibiting the establishment of religion means all of this.
Right. Right. So amending that amendment. So that would be certainly one way to go about doing it. We know how hard it is to amend the Constitution, though.
Right.
And so there are other legislative paths to get that done. One would be, repealing these bills that have been sort of gerrymandered and used against what their intentional purpose was for. RFRA is a perfect example. Even the author of the bill has since come out against it because it's been abused and used in the wrong way. And so these are things that we are going to continue to advocate for, and there are paths forward to strengthen that wall and get it back to where it needs to be. It just, the American people need to make their decisions in November, and we will see about how we can do that going from there, I think.
Right. Because RFRA wasn't that about Navajos being free to smoke peyote?
Correct. That's exactly. It was mostly to help Native American religions stop the encroachment on their land, because many times their religions involve specific portions of land that that if the government was to build a project on or something like that would be gone. So those were the initial reasons for RFRA, and since have been distorted and used to prevent people from getting services and things of that nature. So it's certainly something that we'd like to see repealed and fixed going.
Let's go ahead and wrap up.
Sure.
Casey, it's been really good having you on the podcast. But first reach out to you, I think it was in April. So glad we were able to make this happen.
Absolutely.
What can people do right now to help the work that you do?
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And first, I want to thank both you and Lauren for having me on your podcast. It's a wonderful show, and I love the work that you all do, and I hope that you continue to do it. And I can't thank you enough for the support that you give the community. If your listeners want to help, the best thing that they can do is go to secular.org and sign up for our newsletter so you can get all that information. And while you're there, we understand that these are difficult times, that a lot of people are struggling right now. But if you have the capacity, while you're on our website finding out what we do, hit that donate button up at the top right hand portion of the homepage. It's a big red button. You can't miss it. Every dollar goes to fighting for secular values in Washington and ensuring that separation between state and religion is maintained and strengthened. And every dollar is also appreciated. So we encourage them to do that, or at the very least, just go to our website and check it out and see what we're doing. We always appreciate people who are informed and understand what we're doing in Washington on their behalf.
All right. Well, thank you very much. All right. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and we have some feedback from Rich as a follow-up to his last comment. He wrote, Dustin, I should have qualified my remark about the 1/3 stupidity ratio. More likely on any given issue, 1/3 of the population will take a stupid position, but are not necessarily stupid all the time, although some certainly are. Yeah, that's fair. Thanks for that qualification. Now, I would say when you look at the correlation between devout religious people, their support for Trump, and seemingly opposition to all human rights, it is looking more and more like that 1/3 is coalescing into the same group of people. Hopefully that can change. And we got a new patron, Big Easy Blasphemy. So thank you, Big Easy. If you want to contact us, you can reach us at contact@atheistnomads.com. You can use the SpeakPipe button on the website or the contact form on the website at atheistnomads.com. And if you would like to support the show, you can find out how at atheistnomads.com/donate, or just go to the Patreon page at patreon.com/atheistnomads. Until next week, this has been the Atheist Nomads.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Atheist Nomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.